She's like, I'm trying to clear my name. And it's not working.
And so then it just kind of spirals out of control.
And so what do you believe? You kind of do need to look at the last person he was with who has a lot of holes in their alibi. Hi guys, welcome back to Clues, where we sneak past the crime scene tape to explore the key evidence behind some of the most gripping true crime cases.
I'm Kaelyn Moore, and I'll be the one digging deeper into the timelines, the backstories, and the court files related to this case.
And I'm your internet sleuth, Morgan Absher. I'm diving into everything I can find on the internet, from Reddit posts to news articles, and pulling out the strings that add up or don't.
Okay, today we are unraveling the chilling mystery of Kyron Horman, a shy, sweet 7-year-old boy with glasses and a really big toothy grin who dreamed of one day becoming a detective. But on a seemingly ordinary morning in 2010, Kyron's family suffered every parent's worst nightmare when he vanished from his own school.
There were no solid witnesses, no concrete evidence, just silence. Even from the person who saw him last. Which is why Kyron's disappearance sparked the largest manhunt in Oregon history, and a criminal investigation that pointed disturbingly close to home. More on the case and the clues that defined it after this quick break. This is going to be a bit of a heavy one today.
Yes, it is a very heavy one.
It's a heavy one. We obviously have a missing child involved in this case, and that is hard. That's just devastating for so many. So I have a little bit of an ask for you guys out there listening. It's easy for us to lose hope that these kids are not going to come home. But I want to highlight some cases where they have come home. They have been found. There's one as recent as September of last year where a boy abducted from California in 1951 at age 6 was found alive on the East Coast more than 70 years later.
You're kidding. That's
Nope.
got to be in the Hall of Fame for most amount of time that a kid's been found.
So that's how I found it. I was trying to do some research to let's just give the family a little bit of hope. These people do come home. So yeah, it was Luis Albino, 6 years old, when he was abducted while playing in Oakland, California.
Who had abducted him? Do they know?
So it was actually a woman who abducted him, promised him candy, and then flew him to the East Coast and raised him as her own son.
Whoa.
Yeah, so he was found with DNA technology.
And he had no idea.
Old photos. No.
Oh my gosh.
So there's quite a few cases. I know we have JC Dugard, who was found after 18 years. So there's so many of these cases where they come home. So if you know a case like that, please put it in the comments. I'd like to research some of these cases, and it's good to see because nothing's impossible.
I agree. And today we are talking about a case where a little boy did not come home. And so for everyone watching, it's very sensitive in that way. There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of people coming forward with their own theories who are involved in this case. And so I wanted to mention before we dive in that one of the biggest sources you're going to find on the case of Kyron Horman is a book called Boy Missing: The Search for Kyron Horman. And that was written by Rebecca Morris in 2020 is when it came out. Now, Rebecca's main source in this book, and we're going to talk about it a lot in the script, that was a huge resource that we used while writing this script and doing the research. Her main source that she used was Kyron's biological mother. And so reading about this case, and one thing people say when police are not coming forward with a narrative, someone else will fill the space of that narrative. And it seems like in this case, Kyron's biological mother has really filled that space. We're going to talk about it, some conflicting things that come up about that book and our research. But I think for now, let's just dive into it. Let's get straight to it. So we're going to head 16 miles northwest of Portland, Oregon in 2010, near the towns of Falkenberg and Burlington. It's driving distance to Portland, but it's still a very rural area. You've got mountains on one side, farms, marshlands, thousands of acres of forest on the other. It sounds like this very beautiful, peaceful place. But in 2010, that peace was shattered pretty much for good when a 7-year-old boy named Kyron Horman went missing. So 7-year-old Kyron Horman woke up on the morning of June 4th, 2010, excited about his second grade science fair project, which was all about the life cycle of red-eyed tree frogs. It's very adorable. That day was also Parents' Day, where everyone was invited to school to see these kids' projects. So Kyron's father, Kane, has to miss it because he has work that day. But before he left that morning, around 7:45, he told Kyron how proud he was of him and that his wife, which is Kyron's stepmom named Terry, was going to be there instead. So around 8 a.m., Terry strapped their 19-month-old daughter, Kiara, into her car seat, and Kyron hops in the back seat with her. Terry then drove Kane's white Ford F-250 pickup truck instead of her usual red Mustang because she said that she thought it was going to be easier to transport Kyron's project in that car. And they arrived at Skyline K-8 school before 8:15 a.m., and the place was in complete chaos, as you can maybe imagine. It was packed with over 400 visitors. You have all the kids, you have all their parents, grandparents, siblings. They're all there to see these kids' projects. Kyron dropped off his backpack and he hung up his jacket in his classroom before he went and showed his project to everyone. Then Terry, Kiara, and Kyron wandered through various classrooms, checking on the other kids' projects that brought them in. And they arrived at Kyron's class, where Terry snaps this photo of Kyron standing proudly next to his diorama. He has this huge gap-toothed grin. He has his little glasses on, and he's wearing his crime scene investigation shirt because he was obsessed with CSI and being a detective. And around 8:45 in the morning, Terry says goodbye to Kyron. She says that the two of them went up different stairwells, and she watched as Kyron walked down the hallway towards his classroom. The fair was still going on that day, but she had all of these errands to run, and he had a full day of school left. So after she sees him walk down the hallway towards the class, she heads for her truck. Then Terry spends some of her morning running errands with her baby Kiara. At 1:21 p.m., she posts a photo of Kyron with his science fair project on Facebook, the one that we just talked about, him standing next to the diorama. And then at 3:30 p.m., Kyron's father, Kane, and Terry go to the school bus. They're going to meet Kyron as he comes off of his bus. This is what they normally do in the afternoon. And the bus pulls up. The kids all pile out, and there's no Kyron. So his parents are obviously very confused, and they go and they ask the bus driver about it. And the bus driver says that Kyron never got on the bus. But he sees how concerned they are about this, and the bus driver radioed what at the time was called the school secretary. Today, they say administrator, but he radios her for more information. And that's when Kane and Terry learned something absolutely bewildering. They learned that at 10 a.m., when the regular classes began at school, Kyron's teacher, Christina Porter, had marked him absent. However, and get this, no one called home to see where he was. And when the staff went to check, they found his jacket and backpack were still in the classroom, right where he left them, in the class, before the science fair. So now Kane and Terry really start panicking. They rush to the school. They want to go check this out for themselves. And around 3:56 p.m., a 911 call finally goes out. That 7-year-old Kyron Horman is missing. And by this point, it's been over 7 hours since Terry said she last saw him. So let's rewind just a tiny bit about who Kyron actually was. He was born September 9th, 2002. He was described as being really smart, really curious, a little bit shy. He wore glasses. He had this adorable gap-toothed smile we talked about and a V-shaped birthmark on his head. And like lots of kids, he loved riding his bike. He loved eating dessert, was one of the things that they always said about him. He loved playing with cars and Legos, and he knew exactly what he wanted to be when he grew up, a detective, just like his stepdad, Tony. That's why he was wearing that crime scene investigator shirt, because he was obsessed with his stepdad, Tony. But here's the thing that really gets me about Kyron. One thing that came up when we were doing the research is that Kyron had this huge fear of getting lost, and he was described as being really shy, so he wasn't one to necessarily talk to strangers. But he was pretty nearsighted, and without his glasses, he couldn't see that far in front of him. And the idea of being somewhere unfamiliar and not being able to find his way home absolutely terrified him.
Yeah, so it's not seeming like he would just wander off on his own.
Right. That's one thing that they say a lot when they first hear that he didn't come home. And I definitely identify with that. I always am nervous that like I'm going to be somewhere and accidentally like have to take my contacts out and then I can't see. Like I definitely identify with that fear.
Yeah, I do too. I cannot see my phone in front of my face without my contacts. So it is scary.
Yeah, yeah. And then I wanted to talk a little bit more about Kyron's family because this is where it starts getting a little bit complicated.
Yeah, it's very complex family dynamic.
Yes. In 2010, Kyron lived with his dad, Kane, and his stepmom, Terry Moulton Horman. also his 19-month-old half-sister Kiara. Kane, his dad, is a software engineer at Intel. He's described as having a good poker face. He's the kind of guy who keeps his emotions really close to the vest. It's very hard to tell what he's thinking. As we'll talk about in some of the press conferences, you just cannot read his face. Kane separated from Kyron's biological mother, Desiree Young, before Kyron was even born. I read somewhere that she was 8 months pregnant when they separated. And the reason they separated was because Kane was having an affair with Terry. And Terry was actually in the hospital the day that Kyron was born, visiting the baby that she knew was going to be his.
This sounds like one of my Reddit stories that I read on Two Hot Takes. Like kind of a mess.
Yeah. Really messy emotional situation.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Initially, Desiree took custody of Kyron, but when Kyron was about 2 years old, Desiree was visiting friends in Canada when she developed a serious kidney infection. It was a little hard to find information about how this happened. I read that Desiree had suffered from kidney issues in the past, but she felt like her doctors in Oregon hadn't really gotten to the root cause. I'd also read somewhere that she said it was from taking some sort of supplement. She hasn't come forward and said what supplement it was or how much she took of it, but there was maybe something she was ingesting that was contributing to the kidney issues she was having. Regardless, not super important. But one of the Canadian doctors that she met with promised that they could help. So she extended her stay in Canada for much longer than she was supposed to be there for. And because she did this, she gave temporary custody of Kyron back over to Kane. And that kind of shot herself in the foot, because when you give temporary custody of a child over to someone else, it is hard oftentimes to get custody back. And I think there were specific laws in Oregon at the time that made it even more difficult. But Desiree expected that she was going to get Kyron back basically right when she returned back to the States, just a few months later. But Kane decided that he wanted full custody. And so that's just kind of how it ended up. Desiree ended up taking Kane to court. There was a whole 2-year battle that went down, and the judge ruled in Kane's favor. Kyron was going to be in Kane and Terry's custody from now on. And ever since then, Kyron had been living primarily with Kane and his stepmom, Terry. And this really hurt Desiree. I mean,
yeah,
listen,
understandable.
I get it. Giving birth and your husband's affair partner is in the room. And then you give up custody because you have to deal with your own health issues. And all of a sudden, custody goes back to them. And now this woman's going to raise your kid as her own. Heartbreaking. I understand why she was so incredibly hurt by this.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's insane. And I would be crashing out. If it were me personally, I would be crashing out. It would feel terrible. So it's understandable. She
really still wants to be part of Kyron's life in any way she can. So she comes back to Oregon, but she moves a couple of hours away in Medford, Oregon. She wants to be closer to her parents, but also close enough that she can visit Kyron when she could. And afterwards, she gets this job working in fraud detection at a bank. And that's where she meets her future husband, Tony Young, the one that Kyron was absolutely obsessed with. He's a detective with the Medford Police Department, and he investigates financial crimes, which I thought was really interesting. And I mentioned Terry already, Kyron's stepmom, but here's a few more details we have about her because she obviously is going to come up a lot in this story. But Terry was a teacher. She'd been married twice before. She had a 9-year-old son named James from a previous marriage. She also, like we mentioned, knew Kane while he was married to Desiree. In 2007, when he was 34 and she was 37, they tied the knot at a wedding ceremony in Hawaii. They got officially married. And soon they had their own little girl, Kiara. Terry quit her job. She focused most of her energy on being a mom. She would also later say, too, that that was kind of at the behest of Kane. He really wanted her to spend more time at home and not work. And she would still kind of substitute occasionally. She knew that she wanted to return to teaching full-time eventually. But for right now in this moment, especially when Kyron goes missing, the kids were her full-time job. People who knew her said that she was very involved with Kyron's life and especially his school activities. She always volunteered at everything. She helped out with a ton of school events. She got him ready for school every morning. She was always there at the bus to pick him up. And as far as anyone could tell, at least from the outside, the Hormans seemed to be this picture of kind of suburban bliss, at least until the morning of June 4th, 2010. So let's go back to where we are in the story. a 911 call goes out, and that sets off a really massive response from multiple agencies.
Yeah, I actually saw too from one source that they sent out like a text, a message automated to all the parents, right? It was supposed to go to all the parents of just Kyron's school, Skyline. However, it went out to all parents of all of like Portland, basically.
Yeah.
And so not only did you have parents from Kyron's school, you had anyone with a child K through 12 getting notifications and being on the lookout for a little missing boy. So this spread like wildfire pretty quickly.
Everyone immediately knows that a 7-year-old boy has gone missing from one of the schools.
Yeah.
And is kind of keeping an eye out. So initially, the Portland Police Bureau officers and Multnomah County Sheriff's Department arrived at the school and at the Horman home by about 4:30 that day. The problem with this, though, was the school at the time didn't have an official sign-in system, especially on really high traffic days where everyone's parents and guardians and siblings were going to be coming and going. They also didn't have security cameras. Now, I know we have parents that listen to the show, and I texted every parent I knew to be like, how could this happen? Don't we have checks in place so that kids, if they don't show up to school, like, aren't they supposed to contact the parents?
Yeah, especially 2010.
And now they do. Now there's automated systems that do that. But at most schools, it was sign-in systems or kids are coming and going. It's hard to keep track. And so they just didn't have anything in place that day to be like, hey, this kid is missing. We have an official record of it. The parents called with an excuse, like a good excuse as to why they're not here. So nothing. He just didn't show up to class and it never got reported. There was really no way to track who was coming and going in the school, and that was going to make the investigation a lot harder. By 8:30 p.m. that night, professional search and rescue teams started scouring the area for Kyron. They have dogs, they have horses, they have helicopters. They check every barn in the area. They're looking in trucks. They're just trying door handles on cars. They're looking into buildings, just making sure that he didn't accidentally hide somewhere and they just have to grab him. They're looking everywhere, but there is no sign of him. Not a backpack, not a piece of clothing, not something that fell out of his pockets, nothing. Teams continue searching for the next 8 days. Hours are ticking by, there's no results, and the police realized it was starting to look less and less like Kyron just had wandered off. And so now they're starting to think that maybe this was a kidnapping situation, which I'm sorry, but 8 days into an investigation feels like a long time to start thinking about kidnapping.
Yeah.
On June 7th, Multnomah County Sheriff's Captain Jason Gates hit that botchboard, makes a tearful response during a press conference where he says, quote, "We're going to bring you home, buddy." And it's really chilling hearing him say that now in hindsight.
It's hard to watch.
And on June 13th, Sheriff Dan Staton from the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office announced that the case had been reclassified as a criminal investigation, and he offers a $25,000 reward for anyone who can help locate Kyron.
So as you mentioned, 8 days later, this is getting reclassified, which, and some of you might be like, Morgan, they had search parties out there. They were looking everywhere. Why did you add something on the botched board? I'm going to share some stats that just demonstrate how important it is to act so early on these missing children cases. And that's why I got a tally on the botched board. So according to the FBI's National Center for Crime Information, there are over 300,000 reports of missing children every year in the U.S. But of that number, only a small percentage are actually kidnappings. A lot of them are runaways or kids who have even been like abandoned by their parents. But as for the abductions, only about 1% are abductions by non-family members. The majority of these abductions are committed by family members. So, according to an article in Reuters, about 94% of missing children are actually found in the first 3 days. So to wait until day 8 to start looking at kidnapping, like there's a lot of missed opportunities on, things like Amber Alerts and searching trucks and cars that are leaving the state. So that's an important thing to consider here in this one. And then there's also a stat from Reuters that by a week, the number goes up to 98%.
And even with, I will say, 1% of kids being abducted by non-family members, that's still, 3,000 kids a year that are being abducted by strangers
It happens.
or teachers or whatever. But that's still terrifying.
It absolutely
It's small
happens.
and it's incredibly rare, but that's still 3,000 kids.
I mean, the case I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, he was found 70 years later, picked up from a stranger in a park.
Just a random woman.
It happens. So it's crucial to just reclassify and make sure you're addressing it as soon as you can.
Absolutely. And so by day 8, the cops pretty much know that they're in trouble, that 8 days have gone by without any sign of Kyron. The chances that something horrible has happened are really high at this point. And it seems like they really turn their investigation immediately to the family. Remember, there's not cameras in the classes, there's not cameras at the school, so they don't know if like a random person came in and left with Kyron. But the first thing they do is look at Kyron's family. Desiree, they said, had the clearest motive. You know, she tried to get custody of Kyron and that failed. So they interview Kane and they're able to confirm his alibi, that he was at work at the time that Kyron disappeared from school. So the cops really want to use him to gather more information on Desiree. So they ask Kane to wear a wire to see if Desiree would say anything incriminating in his presence. And Kane agrees to this. But he does wear this wire and Desiree doesn't reveal anything of importance. And Desiree ultimately goes on to be cleared. She also has an alibi. The concerned mom even goes on Good Morning America and says, quote, "Honestly, it's a parent's worst nightmare. We've racked our brains trying to think of reasons why. We cannot come up with anything. It's like a portal opened up in the school and Kyron just vanished into it. It's a mystery." But something else during this part of the investigation sets off some alarm bells for police. And that is a statement that ends up getting given to the police from Kane's current wife, Terry. Because the more they start looking into the events of the morning of June 4th, the more Terry's alibi starts to crumble a little bit.
Which brings us to our first clue, Terry's timeline. So let's walk through a little bit about what Terry says she did after leaving Kyron at school that morning. She first tells police that she left Skyline Elementary around 8:45 a.m. with baby Kiara, who had an earache at the time. From there, she drove to a Fred Meyer grocery store in Hillsboro, about 5 miles south of the school, to pick up medicine for Kiara. She got a coffee at this time, and then when she couldn't find the medication, she went to a second Fred Meyer in Beaverton, a few miles southeast of there. Now, police can verify all of these Fred Meyer visits because there's actually surveillance footage and receipts. So at 9:12 a.m., cameras catch Terry leaving the first store. At 9:40 a.m., she's seen leaving the second one. The footage shows Kiara in her car seat, but it's impossible to say if anyone else is in the truck. And a part of the problem with, seeing if anyone's in the truck and using this security footage, Terry parked seemingly as far away from both of the store entrances as she could. And there was plenty of parking near the front of the store. So it's looking a little odd. When cops ask her about this, she says it's because Kane always parks far away too, probably so the truck doesn't get scratched or hit by other cars trying to park. So that's plausible to investigators. But what's not making sense is that police can't find the medication that she bought at the second store. This earache medication for the baby.
I believe
it's
it was
gone.
Child's Motrin that she said she bought.
But that's not really what's raising their eyebrows as high as they are. It's actually what Terry did after these store visits. And it's the fact that we really can't account for her. No one can actually account for Terry's whereabouts for the next 2 hours and 40 minutes after that. The next time she pops up on anyone's radar is at a 24-hour fitness gym in Beaverton. Terry's initial statement was that she arrived there at 11:39 a.m. However, when investigators start reviewing this footage, she actually shows up at 12:20 p.m., so about a 40-minute difference. She brought baby Kiara inside, but she didn't work out. Instead, she spent about 20 minutes just chatting with casual acquaintances and then left.
I think in that time, too, the people that were there said that she spent a lot of time talking about Kyron and his project.
It's looking a little odd. She then says she gets home around 1 p.m., where she then posts that photo of Kyron on her Facebook page and then spends a couple of hours emailing. Then goes to pick Kyron up at the bus stop with Kane. When detectives ask her about the missing time, she tells them that she was driving around on rural roads trying to soothe Kiara with the lull of the car. Since she was totally alone, there's no way to really verify this story. There's no camera footage, no GPS that can show where she traveled. The only confirmed sighting during this window of missing time was from a witness who said they saw her truck actually pulled over near like this fire trail near Newbury Road, which is less than 2 miles from Kyron's school. When police confront her about this and ask her about it, she says she was changing a diaper. And when they ask her where she disposed of the diaper, Terry says she doesn't know. Which, I'm curious if there's parents out there that can comment on that. Like, I wouldn't pull over on a random road. I'd wait till I got to the store that maybe had a family bathroom with a changing table.
This is something I consulted a lot of parents about.
Did
I've
you?
been like texting parents I know obsessively, being like, what's the deal with this? But so what they said is oftentimes like
If
you would
it
only
smells
pull
that
over to the
bad?
side if it was really bad.
Which, like, I guess maybe you know about a blown out diaper smell, but
and
like
producer Kristen has a daughter.
when she screams. Oh, they scream sometimes.
They'll scream when they want their diaper changed.
Okay.
But in that situation, would there be lots of wipes everywhere and maybe
I would bring
Dog poo bags.
Put the stuff in there.
Parent hack,
and
you
then
guys.
you just toss it wherever you can. Obviously, because you're just going to throw it in a random garbage can.
Okay.
Yeah, because you want it out of the car.
Yeah. So parents, please chime in. That's just like one thing in this story where I'm like,
If someone were to ask you where you threw a diaper out on a random day, would you be able to remember? Because that is what I'm very curious about. I see producer Kristen already shaking her head on that. But just interesting that she is supposedly changing this diaper.
But all of this diaper issues aside, here's where the story starts to seem like really just problematic and confusing. So Kyron's teacher at school remembers Terry saying that Kyron had a doctor's appointment that day. And so when police ask her about it, Terry insists that the appointment was scheduled for the following Friday. And she made this crystal clear to the teacher.
But this is now we're guessing why the teacher didn't say anything when Kyron wasn't in his classroom. Because in her mind, she's like, oh, he has a doctor's appointment today. So, of course.
She says exactly that. She's like, I wasn't concerned because Terry had told me he wasn't going to be there. Doctor's appointment. What's even more concerning is that Terry changed her story multiple times over the first couple of days after the disappearance, namely about all these stops she made. At first, Terry claimed she spent 90 minutes driving Kiara around, but then she started to remember all of these other stops she had actually made. She said she dropped off some dry cleaning and visited the craft store Michael's at around 10 a.m., but didn't buy anything at that time, and no one remembers seeing her at that store. No security footage, and on June 4th, it was a very slow business day, so you would think if she was there with a baby who has an earache and maybe crying, someone would have spotted her. And so all of this is really starting to make Terry look really suspicious to police, and it kind of only gets worse from there. So it's now June 7th, and Kyron has been missing for 3 days. And police keep poking at Terry, kind of poking out all of these holes in her story. And Terry just keeps insisting that she left Kyron's school that day with Kiara and no one else. Which brings us to clue number 2. We have some eyewitness testimony. So one of the first eyewitnesses was an 8-year-old kid named Tanner. Tanner was one of Kyron's friends at school, and he happened to be in the hallway that morning after the science fair had ended. According to Tanner, he was walking through the school when he passed Kyron on the stairs. The two boys waved at each other, and Tanner watched as Kyron headed towards his classroom. Here's a crucial part, though. Tanner also told investigators that he saw Terry leave the school that morning, and Kyron wasn't with her. But other witnesses come forward and have a completely different story. Another one of Kyron's second-grade friends, named Carson, said he saw Kyron leaving the school with Terry. Now, Carson said that Terry and Kyron weren't holding hands or anything obvious like that, but they were definitely walking out together. And Carson wasn't the only one to say that. At the time, he was with his sister and grandmother, so there was another adult there, and they all backed up this claim that Terry and Kyron walked out of the front door of the school together. A bus driver, and one source I saw said this was actually Kyron's bus driver, said the same thing, and even happened to add another detail. I saw Terry and Kyron walk out together, And Terry hadn't parked in the main lot where most parents were dropping off their kids. Instead, she had parked on a gravel road nearby, partly out of sight from the main entrance, which could be seen as odd given there were plenty of free spaces. But again, she did park far away when she went to the stores that morning. So maybe she just didn't want to scratch her husband's truck. But again, you have eyewitness testimony that they saw Kyron walk out with her and the truck is then far away. It's just all looking really weird.
I'm going to interject here too, because I want to make a note. I think it's important for everyone to understand where this information is coming from about these other witnesses.
Yes.
Now, the police are incredibly tight-lipped on this case. Most of what we are saying is not coming directly from the police. So when we say that Carson saw Kyron leaving the school with Terry, that's actually coming from the book that I mentioned before, where the source is Kyron's biological mom, Desiree.
Mm-hmm.
So you have Desiree coming forward and saying in interviews on TV that all these people saw Kyron leaving with Terry. Now, we know that the police haven't really investigated those tips much, so we are kind of led to believe that they ended up not being very reliable witnesses, or that there was some sort of miscommunication and those people actually didn't say that they saw Terry leave with Kyron. But I think that is just really important to note here.
I watched an interview with his mom from about a month ago, and that is still very much her point of view in the story.
Yeah.
That these witnesses do exist. Unfortunately, this is one of those situations where like not having camera footage at the school really, really hurts the investigation. I mean, if we had that, we would know, hey, he walked away by himself or he went this direction. Like it's so unfortunate. But at this point in the investigation, investigators didn't think Terry's alibi was very solid, but they still needed more than a few timeline gaps and conflicting eyewitness statements to be sure of anything. So they decided to try a new tactic, which brings us to clue number 3, a polygraph.
Which, you know how I feel about polygraphs.
I know, we need to get you like a polygraph our bad button.
I know. Just a button I can slam every time someone has to take a polygraph
Polygraphs
test.
are bad.
Polygraphs are bad.
Well, they still do it. They give it a go. And investigators didn't just screen Terry with these polygraphs. They do give them to the entire family. So Kyron's biological mother, Desiree, she passed. His stepdad, Tony, passed. His biological father, Kane, passed. And they all had alibis for the time that Kyron went missing. But Terry, she was polygraphed in the summer of 2010, and she didn't pass. We don't have the actual results, but Terry herself does admit that she failed one particular question, and it was Kyron in the car with you?
Now, Kane has also come forward and said that Terry failed the polygraph test. I believe Desiree also says that. She didn't fail. She just didn't pass. There's different levels of results on polygraphs, and hers was inconclusive. So it's not necessarily accurate for even Terry herself to say that she failed. And also, the question of was Kyron in the car with you is very vague and confusing.
He was in the car.
Yes.
To school.
Right. So she, I believe, answered that no, he wasn't in the car with her, but she didn't really understand what they were asking. And so that question was inconclusive.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make. And Desiree does remember Terry coming back to the house after doing her polygraph and kind of going on a rant about it, which, given all this context, like it does, make a little sense. And she said Terry was even super angry, blamed that failed question on a hearing problem. So she told investigators that she couldn't hear well in her left ear, and so that's why she misunderstood some of the questions. Later, she would also say that she was stressed out, and that interfered with the results. But something to note here is that Desiree points out that before she took her polygraph, the detectives asked if she could hear the questions clearly. But no experience could be the same. That's a very thing where they ask you that and don't ask Terry necessarily.
So we don't know if they asked Terry, but it sounds from Desiree's perspective, they were asking everyone.
Exactly. But even a little more sus is Terry does go back to take the polygraph again. But she walks out in the middle of it this time. And when they schedule a third polygraph, she fails again. And again, fails inconclusive.
Yeah. She's not passing any of these polygraphs, which I mean, she's the only one that has an alibi that can't be checked. She's the only one that's not passing these polygraphs. Of course, the police are really going to start looking
Yeah.
into her.
And it makes sense. Like, where else do you look at this point? And from her eyes, she feels that this is really unfair. They've only really focused this investigation on her. And these polygraphs were optional. So why is it then adding to kind of the intrigue surrounding her, is how she's seemingly feeling.
And she keeps coming back. Like, the polygraphs are optional, and she does keep going back for them.
Yeah.
She goes a second time. Sure, she walks out, but then she goes back a third time. And I believe after that is when she decides she's going to stop going.
Yeah, which
because it's not going very well for her.
It's not going well. It's making her look more suspicious. From maybe her perspective, she's like, I'm trying to clear my name. And it's not working. So why keep putting myself out there?
But on the other hand, it's like, which we talk about a lot in these cases, it's the person being like, I need to prove to them how innocent I am, knowing that they're not innocent. And so then it just kind of spirals out of control.
And so what do you believe?
Right.
Like, where do you go? And you don't have any idea where Kyron is. So you kind of do need to look at the last person he was with who has a lot of holes in their alibi.
Of course. And like you were saying too, she's the last one that was seen. She's going into this polygraph knowing that she was the last one to see him and that things are already not going well for her. And so I can only imagine that that stress may have also affected her results.
Yeah, and how can you not be stressed? There's a 7-year-old little boy missing. So police continue to kind of focus in on Terry, and this brings us to clue number 4. They start going through Terry's cell phone records. Terry has her story about, going to the stores and buying the cold medicine and driving around and doing all these errands. And that was supposedly around 10 a.m. So even though these last 2 stops weren't able to be confirmed, the stop at the craft store, there was surveillance footage showing her at the 2 Fred Meyers locations. But when investigators got access to her cell phone data, they discovered her story, again, just didn't seem to add up. Because at one point during the gap of missing time, Terry's phone was far away from all of these locations. According to her cell phone records, Terry made a phone call at 11 a.m., which pinged off of a cell phone tower near Sauvie Island, which this is about 12 miles from Kyron's home and his school.
And I made a note here because I remember reading about this during the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell trial that just happened. But an expert during that trial said that they could accurately pinpoint someone's location within 55 centimeters.
That's insane to me.
Via cell phone pings, but they needed 2 pings to do it. And if they only had 1 ping, they really couldn't nail down where the person was at all. It was like within 12 miles or something, or it was within miles that they could have been. But if they had 2 pings, 55 centimeters. However, in this, we just have the 1 ping.
Only 1 ping. And this area is huge. Like, Sauvie Island is this super undeveloped island area. It's about 18 miles northwest of Portland. And if you look on a map and kind of go into it more, it's about the size of Manhattan. So it's not a small area. But this is looking really important to investigators because it's not close to either of the Fred Meyers stores that Terry had gone into or her Beaverton gym. In fact, it's nowhere near where Terry said she went that day during this initial interview. So supposedly the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office was able to narrow this ping to within a mile of a cell phone tower there. Again, I'm not sure what the technology is, but this is what they're saying. And again, when police asked Terry about it, she changes her story. She said she was there because that was the road she took out to try and calm her baby down. And my parents did this. Like, my dad used to put me in the car at 3, 4 a.m. and go find a train in the middle of the night so I'd stop crying. So, desperate times with little ones could call for desperate measures. So when investigators learn about this cell phone ping, they immediately shift their investigation and they start looking at Sauvie Island. Around June 11th, they brought in search teams on foot, on horseback, in boats. They had divers searching the waters all around the island. They combed through marshes, farmland, wooded areas, basically everywhere that you would maybe be able to hide a body. And they found no trace of Kyron.
But you've already mentioned that this is the size of Manhattan.
It's huge.
So if you're bringing in a search team of, even if it's 1,000 people, can you imagine that many people searching Manhattan for a 7-year-old's body. Like, the fact that they don't find any trace is not surprising to me because I just don't know how you even find anything.
I mean,
in
he
there.
left all of his things at school.
It's all
Backpack.
marshland too. Like, even if he was there, I just don't think that they would be able to find him.
No,
all
and
that
stuff
easily.
sinks into marshes and
Yeah.
bogs. Like it's like a needle in a not even a haystack, like a needle in a huge ass hay field. Like it's just
Exactly.
it's a difficult search. And I will give investigators a lot of credit. Like they were
For
really
searching.
pooling resources and looking everywhere they could.
Yeah, you definitely have the taxpayers that start complaining about it because they're spending a lot of money on these searches.
Yeah, we'll
And
get
some
to
people,
it.
yeah, right. But like they are
We-
pouring resources into this.
Yeah, it was a lot of effort. But again, it doesn't turn up anything. But like they're going off the evidence and the data they have. Like Terry's phone did still ping there. And this is a huge red flag for them. But what if she was doing as she claimed? What if she was just running errands and driving around to comfort her baby? I mean, again, earache, you guys. I'm not a parent, but like earaches, babies,
And
they're
the
upset.
baby's
They
screaming.
scream.
But one thing people did bring up is like if the baby is in so much pain and needs to be lulled to sleep for 90 minutes, why do you immediately go to the gym to hang out with your friends? And she's bringing the baby in and out of the Fred Meyer stores too. So it just like is a little inconsistent.
Yeah.
And everyone is paying attention to that.
People
Because all eyes are on her.
they're honed in.
And there's a little bit more information that we have here on the cell phone ping because the accuracy of that has been like really debated.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, cell phone ping location can depend on the number and type of cell phone towers that are in the area. So in an area like Sauvie Island, which is very rural, it has very few towers, it can sometimes really reduce the accuracy of that ping because it covers a large radius. We talked about this when we were doing Adea Shabani because his cell phone was pinging all over the place. And ultimately, it said that he was very far from where he actually was because of the cell phone data.
We need to do like literally a mini episode on cell phone data and the science behind it because it's a lot. And again, we have the war of the experts that you can seemingly find someone to say two different things.
This is when we need our phone a scientist.
Who is out there? Who's a cell phone ping expert? We know we have to have one of you.
Exactly. There definitely is someone out there.
Yeah.
So the search of Sauvie Island was still ongoing. And around that time, the search around Kyron's school comes to a close. On June 13th, 9 days after Kyron vanished, Sheriff Dan Staton announced that his department was releasing most of the search teams. Then he told the press that he was going to shift the operations focus to a criminal investigation. And on June 17th, that's 4 days later, the press reported that Terry Moulton Horman had become the center of that investigation. And one thing that I thought was really interesting, when you read through all the articles at the time, they do not call her a suspect. They say that she's the center of the investigation. She is never referred to as a person of interest or a key suspect. It is clear, though, that the police are not looking into anyone else at that point. And in the meantime, tensions really start climbing between Kyron's parents, Desiree and Kane. Desiree had decided right away that without a doubt, no questions asked, Terry was responsible. She immediately jumps on that train. I mean, she's still on it today. The book is evidence of that. But the only time the couple says that either of them saw Terry cry was at a press conference. And I've watched this press conference. I don't know if you saw it. There's a press conference that the families give almost immediately afterwards where they're all standing there. They have their like searching for Kyron t-shirts on. And it's Desiree and her husband, Terry and Kane. And they're all really, really crying. If you were just to watch that clip out of context, I don't think you could point at any of them and think that they were guilty. It's not like Scott Peterson where he's standing there so weird and looking like he's bored. Everyone looks very upset. But Desiree says that was the only time that Terry actually cried about this. Of the four, though, I will say Kane is like probably the hardest to read. Like we said, he has a good poker face. Desiree didn't think that he was personally responsible, but she starts really blaming Kane for letting Terry get so close to Kyron. But Kane at this time really doesn't think that Terry had anything to do with it, at least not outright. He even goes on the Today Show and he defends her, saying, quote, Terry, like the rest of us, is extremely committed to finding Kyron, and she's working extremely hard with investigators to bring him home. And that is one thing I will say about her is she is very cooperative with police. Even though it is looking bad for her, she keeps going in and giving interviews and she does all those polygraph tests. But in private, it seems like their relationship starts to really become more strained than it already was. their relationship already was kind of on the rocks for a while, even before Kyron went missing. But for the sake of finding their son, Kane and Terry present this very unified front. However, in late June, whatever alliance they did have during this time seems to be completely broken for good. And that's because on June 27th, 24 days after Kyron goes missing, detectives invited Kane, Desiree, and Tony to a Marriott hotel in downtown Portland. And once the three of them were seated, the cops shared some key updates that they had on this investigation. Because up until this point, they're looking at Terry, they're looking at the situation, but they don't have a motive. They're missing their why. Sure, Terry looks pretty suspicious, but what could possibly cause this woman to harm a 7-year-old boy? Or if she didn't harm him, what would cause her to lie so much to them and change her story so much throughout the entire investigation? Well, the detectives told Kane then that before Kyron went missing, Terry had actually contacted a divorce attorney. This does not come as a shock to Kane at all. Like we said, their relationship was already strained. They were not really getting along. He also was having an affair. But the cops said that there was more to it than just that. Terry's red Mustang was actually seen cruising on back roads in northwest Portland in the days before Kyron's disappearance. That's not incriminating. It's a little suspicious, though, to them. They wondered if she was doing this because she was scouting places to dispose a body. And remember, at this point, Desiree and Tony are both singing from rooftops that Terry had something to do with this. And it seems like in this meeting, when the cops share the information that they have, it really starts to turn Kane against her as well.
Things are seemingly falling apart. And there's one last tip they have up their sleeve that really is just like the put a fork in it, I'm done for Kane, which is our clue number 5, the Hitman. And you guys are like, a hitman? Yeah, Hitman. Detectives asked Kane about his landscaper, a guy named Rodolfo Sanchez. They wondered, how did Kane know him? Had he ever had any problems with him? And Kane was like really confused. He's like, landscaper? What are you talking? I don't have a landscaper.
He had no idea they had a landscaper.
He had no idea. He's like, what do you mean? I have no idea. And he'd certainly never heard the name Rodolfo Sanchez, which made the next part sound extremely wild. They told Kane that Rodolfo, who actually went by Rudy, had come forward with a shocking story about Terry. According to Rudy, back in January 2010, about 5 months before Kyron disappeared, Terry had approached him about doing some work around their property. But it wasn't the kind of work you'd expect a landscaper to do. Rudy claimed that Terry had offered him $10,000 to kill Kane. According to Rudy, Terry told him that Kane was abusive and she needed him gone. She told Rudy that when he killed Kane, he would have the money on him, so all Rudy would have to do is make it look like a robbery gone wrong. There's speculation here that it's even offered she threw in sexual favors as a part of the payment, but Rudy refused to help. And when he heard about Kyron, he took this story to the police. And up until this point, one of the big questions on everyone's mind is Terry capable of murder? And with this hitman being exposed, it's looking like the answer could be yes.
Well, Terry goes on Dr. Phil years after this, and you best believe that Dr. Phil really does grill her about the hitman she hired. So there's a little bit more context as to why she hired a landscaper without her husband's knowledge. And what she says, at least to Dr. Phil, is that Kane was really, remember, she has this other son, James. And Kane was really big on James has to do all of the yard work. I don't want to take care of the yard. I want James to do it. And Terry started feeling bad that all this pressure was being put on James. It was way too much work for him. So under the table, she gets this landscaper. I think she used child support payments that were supposed to be going to James, but she uses those payments to hire a landscaper just to kind of help take some of the load off of James. And that's how Rodolfo starts working for the family. So it's not super weird, at least according to Terry. She's like, it's not so strange that we had this landscaper.
Which honestly, I hear that and it makes a lot of sense. Also kind of gives you like, oh, the dynamic here. Like the poor stepson is kind of getting alienated in some way, maybe. Like,
yes,
it does give you more context where you're like, oh, okay.
Also, something that gets forgotten here is Rodolfo hardly spoke any English. And Terry did not speak Spanish. So when they're looking into Rudy more, he has to have a translator there all the time. And this becomes like a huge point in contention because at certain points they feel like the translator is not translating the words properly to him. So they're mad at the translator. He's getting very confused when the questions are being asked to him. So a lot of people speculate that the police really set Rudy up to admit because he didn't understand what was happening, did not speak the language.
Clearly a language barrier.
That Terry asked him to kill her husband for him. And also, he goes on to say that this meeting happened at like a Denny's. It was some sort of public diner where they met up. This is where she asked him. There was no translator present. And it really seems like they wouldn't have been able to have as in-depth of a conversation without translators present. Also, the fact that they were having this conversation in front of everyone, like there's waitstaff there.
It's just not looking plausible.
The whole argument that she hired a hitman does start to fall apart. However, it is so shocking. When I first read that, I had chills. I was so shocked.
Yeah.
That maybe this is something that she was capable of doing. Now, after Kane hears this, there's no doubt in his mind that Terry is capable of doing this and that she is maybe responsible for his son's disappearance. And Rudy agrees to help the police with the next phase of the plan. And that's when they put a wire on Rudy. There's no translator present during any of this part of the investigation. I just want to say. They say that Rudy's going to go to Terry's home. There's going to be an undercover cop that drives him there. He is instructed to knock on the door. Terry answers the door. And what he does at the police requests is he tells her, hey, I've thought about the time that you asked me to kill your husband, and I've decided that I would like to do that. And when Terry hears this, she immediately slams the door in his face and she calls the police. Some people take that a certain way. Some people think that, oh, she was finally caught. So she freaked out and was like self-reporting, or she freaked out and was like, I'm going to get ahead of this. Like, I'm not going to have this conversation with him. Other people say that she knew she was being set up and she knew that she didn't really try to hire a hitman. So when she heard that, she immediately was like, oh, the police are trying to set me up. So I'm just going to call and report this guy because I'm not interested in this at all.
Yeah, it was a catch-22 no matter how she kind of responded.
So not only does this sting fail, doesn't get any information about Kyron, Terry has caught on to the fact that the police might be trying to entrap her. So after this whole thing goes down, Kane doesn't want to wait around to see what Terry's going to do next. And because of that, he also doesn't want to leave his 19-month-old daughter in her care. So he takes the baby and he checks into a hotel. And pretty soon after that, he takes out a restraining order against Terry and he files for divorce. From that moment on, it is the family, the police, the world, everyone against Terry. Almost. Because she does have one ally in this story that we haven't talked about yet. And it's one that may have some information about what happened to Kyron.
So by the end of June, police are convinced that Kyron's disappearance is a crime. And as you guys might be able to gather at this point, they are suspecting that Terry Horman may be the perpetrator. But they're not sure she acted alone. You see, a couple of witnesses supposedly saw another adult in Terry's truck on June 4th. Details about what they saw were sketchy. Like, we don't really know what the person looked like, what gender they may have been. But if there was someone else in the truck, maybe that person was the key to finding Kyron. Which brings us to clue number 6, a woman named Dede Spicer. As soon as Kane moved out of their house, after all the hitman stuff came out, Dede moved right in. Dede was one of Terry's closest friends. They met at the gym. They took an instant liking to each other. Two self-described fitness junkies who liked to wake up early and work out before the sun rose. And when detectives started digging into Dede's activities on June 4th, they found some pretty interesting stuff. Dede worked at a lavender nursery, a small farm in a rural area where Kane and Terry lived. And according to Dede's coworkers, she always ate lunch with them. It was their daily routine. But on June 4th, the day Kyron disappeared, Dede suddenly went missing during lunchtime. Her coworkers tried calling her cell phone. She didn't answer. They looked around the property for her, but they couldn't find her anywhere. And this was right around the same time that Terry was supposedly driving around rural roads trying to soothe baby Kiara's earache. And so when investigators finally tracked Dede down and questioned her about where she had been that day, her story was looking really strange to them. And it's because her story was really vague. She claimed that she was out in the fields prepping for an event. She claimed it was muddy work, so she left her phone in her car, and that's why she missed all of those calls from her coworkers. But what really got the investigators' attention is that a day or two after Kyron went missing, Dede bought a burner phone. She used a fake name to purchase it and then used that phone pretty much from what I've seen exclusively to communicate with Terry. When cops asked her about it, Dede said she bought the burner because she didn't want press or law enforcement listening in on their conversations. She claimed she was just trying to protect her and Terry's privacy. But investigators looked at this as someone that was clearly trying to hide evidence, conspiring about something. And to be fair, Dede wasn't the only person in Terry's life who bought a burner. Apparently, several of her friends actually went out and did the same thing because apparently Terry had asked them to. And when the cops searched Dede's home and workplace, they didn't find anything unusual. Dede insisted she didn't know anything about Kyron's disappearance and that she was at work the whole time and that Terry was innocent.
Well, on July 22nd, Desiree, Tony, and Kane put out a statement begging Dede to cooperate with the investigation. And she replies through a lawyer. And while the lawyer wouldn't answer where Dede was during that gap on June 4th, he did say she already spent more than 3 hours talking to detectives. And I know later on she would say that she was prepping for an event. At some point between the end of June and late July, Dede apparently had a falling out with Terry. She stayed with Terry for 11 days just to support her after Kane took her daughter away. But after Dede moved back home, she and Terry did not speak. And it seems like they just hadn't spoken since that moment. Why? We're not entirely sure. But it does seem like at this time, Terry's friends start deserting her. Now the investigators feel like it's time to really turn up the heat. They have a little bit more leverage to get her on something. On July 26th, Chief Deputy DA Norm Frank convened a grand jury to decide if there was enough evidence to bring the case to trial. Kyron, at that point, had been missing for 53 days. That's a very, very long time for a child to be gone. As we know, every day that passes when a child is missing, they are less likely to be found alive if they are found at all. So by day 53, Frank was looking to prosecute a case against Terry Horman. But despite all of the very circumstantial, we'll add, evidence that suggested Terry had done something to Kyron, they did not have a body, which meant proving foul play was going to be extremely difficult. However, there was one piece of evidence that does come up around this time that might make it possible to convict someone without a body, and it's emails establishing what no one had up until that point, a motive.
So let's take a look at clue number 7, Terry's emails. When appearing on NBC's The Today Show in the summer of 2011, Desiree said that the police had shown her explosive emails they found exchanged between Terry and some of her friends. Desiree says that in these emails, Terry seemed to express a, quote, severe hatred towards Kyron and blamed him for a lot of the issues in her marriage with Kane. It's not clear exactly what was in those emails. Desiree said she couldn't go into details because of the ongoing investigation, but Desiree took them as sure evidence that Terry could be capable of hurting Kyron and even hinted at harming him in those messages. Desiree said in the interview, quote, I now believe without a shadow of a doubt that not only is she capable of hurting Kyron, but that it's clear she could have hurt him in the worst possible way. End quote. Apparently, there was another email that Terry had sent to someone named Michael Cook, too. In that message, Terry talked about planning to leave Kane on June 4th, the exact day that Kyron disappeared, and she spoke about taking Kiara with her. There's allegedly another email where she's talking about Kane being overbearing. Quote, I have to ask him before I go out to meet anyone. I have no money because I stayed home with Kyron at birth since his natural mom wouldn't. Spent all of my $30K to do so, end quote. So a lot of these, obviously, it's kind of hearsay at this point. Investigators are not releasing any of these emails. But Kane's response was that Terry was a, quote, master of deception and misdirection. All the conversations she was having with people was the misdirection part. Kane then goes on to say, and this is something I saw in a recent interview with him too. He says that they were getting in arguments kind of all the time. And it was a lot of times about her relationships with the children in general, and that he didn't really find it acceptable. But Kane also said he never felt like there was any reason to really worry about Terry or her behavior with the children. Like, he never feared for their safety up until that point. So it's kind of all of this is like a take it with a grain of salt. Like, we have to recognize who the sources are in this, and it's something maybe, but like, again, context of the sources here. And there really is no public record that we could find that showed Terry was explicitly threatening to harm Kyron. Instead, it seems like this is Desiree's own interpretation of them. If they did include some sort of direct threat, chances are that would have been enough for police to move forward and press charges. Certainly, the grand jury would have been presented with this evidence, and they found they didn't have enough to move forward. But as far as investigators are concerned about these emails at this point, they didn't serve as concrete evidence of any wrongdoing on Terry's part.
Right. And even despite all of this, the investigation into Terry still moves forward. 40 different witnesses came to testify in front of this grand jury, friends, family, experts, but none of them could convincingly show that Terry was guilty of anything.
And if these emails were substantial, if they did show threats and motive, certainly they would have been presented to this grand jury.
And eventually, Kane is asked by reporters about these emails, and that's when he says to them that they never existed at all. So take that for what you will. And eventually, because of all of this, Deputy DA Norm Frank decides that he simply does not have enough evidence to bring the case to trial. He could have defied the grand jury's recommendation and he could have charged Terry with a crime, but if he failed to get a conviction, he knew that she would walk free forever, so he didn't want to risk it. He decides to put the case on ice and he wants to wait until there's more evidence that surfaces, but unfortunately, nothing ever does. In September of 2010, Sheriff Staten, the lead investigator, holds this really gloomy press conference. He called the search for Kyron the largest, most expensive search in Oregon history. The police had conducted more than 600 searches using 1,300 workers and covered 155 square miles of rugged terrain. The cost in total was $1.4 million, and even after all of that, they still had no idea where Kyron was. The lead detectives would go on to investigate in a special task force, and they could call up new resources if they needed. But all other law enforcement officers who were working the case went back to their regular jobs. Meanwhile, Desiree starts organizing her own searches. She pays for these with donations and fundraising events that she sets up. And since the DA refused to charge Terry with Kyron's death, she decides to try to take things into her own hands. She goes to civil court, and on June 2nd, 2012, Desiree files a $10 million lawsuit against Terry, accusing her of kidnapping Kyron. And part of the reason she does this, I read, is because she wants the police report files to be released. It is very hard to get your hands on these files. Actually, it's impossible. If you're not a police officer, you're not reading the files on this case, even today.
Yeah.
They have not shown these files to anyone. So Desiree is kind of thinking, well, if I sue her, maybe they'll have to release these records and I can read through them, or I can hire a private investigator to read through them, and maybe we'll catch something that no one else could. But her case hits this snag, and that is that the sheriff's office refuses to hand over any of these case files. They're not going to do it because their investigation was still officially ongoing. So they claimed that making their evidence public could jeopardize their work. And then in July of 2013, Desiree calls off this lawsuit. And that was 12 years ago. And that's really the last update, at least in those 12 years that's happened. Kyron's case is still active. It's still one of the largest in Oregon history. And as of a news special that aired around a month ago, it's cost Oregon $1.9 million. And while they continue to keep an eye on Terry Horman as the central figure of the investigation, she's never really been considered a suspect. She remains a free woman to this day. She lives in California. At one point, she did try to change her name, and a bunch of angry people showed up to the courthouse to demand that she didn't do it. And the judge granted that she could not change her name legally. And investigators and the family are just kind of praying for a breakthrough.
Yeah. There are a lot of loose ends, and just kind of weird things like still surrounding this. I think one thing that's kind of interesting is Terry's son has actually requested to see the case files. But again, like those case files are not getting turned over to anyone. In the news special I watched from about a month ago, it was one of the reporters who like first started reporting on this case because his wife had actually gotten a notification from the school system saying missing kid. And he was driving back from another case and was like, I need to get into this now. And so he did a special for the 15-year anniversary of his disappearance and interviewed the family and tried to pull a lot of these records himself. And they are still like, they are on lock.
Yeah, you cannot access these records.
And the internet has a lot to say. I mean, you could go down the Reddit rabbit hole on this case for quite some time.
I was really surprised because I put on my Morgan thinking
did?
cap and I was like, what does the internet say about this? Because after reading through everything, something didn't feel right to me. Reading through all the research, reading the book, everything, something just felt incomplete. And I think it's that everything we're getting is from Desiree, and that the picture that Desiree really paints of Terry is a little confusing to me in that at times Terry is this ultimate mastermind. She's going to the Fred Meyer store so that she has this perfect alibi, walking around looking for medicine that she can't produce because maybe she didn't buy the medicine, maybe it was just for an alibi. And then she goes to the gym so that she has another perfect alibi. She's showing everyone pictures of Kyron and his presentation and putting it on Facebook just so she can present herself as this perfect mother. And then at other times, Desiree paints her to be like the idea that she's this criminal mastermind just completely fades away and she's making these really dumb mistakes that should have been easily caught. And the picture she paints of Terry just feels a little inconsistent to me.
Which is it?
She actually might have just been a good mom and cared about Kyron and was telling people about his presentation. She was like very involved in his life. She was there when he was born. There was nothing really indicating that she hated him other than these emails that no one can produce. So I don't want to come across like I've taken any stance on it, but I was interested when I went on the internet how many people were like, Terry didn't do it.
That is, I literally just got chills as you said that. That is the common consensus. I'm curious to see where our audience falls, especially after presenting all this information.
Yeah.
I feel like with a lot of these cases, we try to just like, here it is, guys. Like, this is what we have. And I sit here and after all my research, after, doing this today, I don't know where I stand. I really don't. The internet is my side of the world. Reddit is fully convinced he walked out.
Just into the woods.
Just walked out into the woods. He did this project on frogs and maybe after seeing, his diorama, wanted to go out and find a real frog himself. I mean, when you see pictures and aerial shots of this school, it's literally a school plopped down in this picturesque nature, hill, tree environment.
Right.
I mean, no one's stopping him. He's going to go outside and take a peek. Kind of weird he wouldn't ask a little buddy to go with him, given how scared he was of getting lost and, the things with his eyesight. But internet is convinced he walked off. But there is one thing I came across. And in one of the subs I found, and this is titled, "What is your Kyron Horman theory?" And it's from r/unresolved mysteries. A lot of people have been commenting saying that they actually attended the school. And it would have been very difficult to get out. It was very fenced. It'd be hard to just get into the woods and start wandering. But hard, not necessarily impossible, right? There's one other comment that I have not fact-checked. I tried to go into it a little bit, and I can't really corroborate anything with it. But there's one comment that I think should be pointed out. So this comment is from Model of Decorum. It's on that same post. They go, "First of all, I don't think Terry did it. She had no time to do so. If she left the school at 8:45, more likely 8:50, since she went up the stairs when the bell rang, said goodbye to Kyron and walked out of the school, went to her truck, her next hour would be like this." And they kind of recant her timeline. And it's just like, where would they have time in that timeline of her going to the store at 9:12 and Kyron got reported missing from the classroom at 10 when attendance was taken? They're like, where in that timeline would Terry have had the time? Maybe he was with her still in the truck.
I guess
obscured from the camera.
the theory would have been that Terry brought him to her first few errands when she was going to the Fred Meyer store, had him stay in the car, parked very far away so that no one could see him on the cameras, which doesn't make any sense to me. Brought the baby in, got the medicine, goes back in the truck, and then in the time that she's looping around with the baby, trying to lull the baby to sleep, that's actually when her car was seen pulled over on the side of the road. She was really in the woods, I guess, disposing of a body, like killing Kyron and disposing of a body.
Mm-hmm.
For her to then show up to the gym 90 minutes later in the same clothes she was seen at Fred Meyer. She doesn't have dirt all over her. She was just burying a body in
Not
the woods.
disheveled, no.
Like, she did, it was reported that she had a gash on her knee. She says that she got that from a weightlifting accident, which, like, also, by the way, we didn't really talk about it. Like, she's a bodybuilder. Terry was a competitive bodybuilder for a while. She still worked out a ton. It's not weird that she went to the gym and was talking to friends necessarily.
Yeah, catch up.
They had a little area where kids could hang out too, so she could put the baby in there, talk to her friends, grab the baby and go. I don't believe that she was just doing that for an alibi. But no one knows how she got that gash. She says she got it from weightlifting, but no one could confirm that that's where she got that gash. But again, she's not really, besides that gash on her knee, I just don't know that anything about her presents, I just killed someone and disposed of a body. That's the thing that I keep snagging on, you know?
So this comment goes on to say, because they're on that page with you, they're not convinced it was her. And they go on to say, here's what I think actually happened. At 8:45, the students were supposed to gather in groups of 5 or 6 to tour the exhibits, and it seems to have been a fairly chaotic affair. As we noted, no sign-in sheet. Hundreds of family and friends and whoever else wants to come see these projects.
Yeah.
All buzzing about the school. A classmate saw Kyron in the upstairs hallway shortly after Terry left, and Kyron said he was going to see an electrical exhibit, which a parent said was in another upstairs classroom in a blog comment. Again, we might have to fact check this one, guys. A friend of Kyron's brother then saw Kyron in the gym with some of his friends looking at other exhibits, and finally he arrived at downstairs classroom 109. There is a blog that published witness statements from some of the children that they saw Kyron leave that room and go outside with a man who asked for help to bring something from his truck. Right outside 109 was the access road that led to the Skyline Boulevard and where someone saw Kyron with an unknown person buy a white truck. The truck was commonly called Terry's truck in the media, but at that point, witnesses had been primed to see any white truck they remembered as Terry's. So a man, probably not a local, walked into the open public school, roamed the halls, acting like he belonged there. There were children who commented on Facebook that there had been a creeper there, so not everyone was fooled. And until he found a child that seemed pliable and meek, he lured him out of the school via the access road, took him to his truck, parked at the access road where a chain blocked him from going further, got Kyron in the car, drove away further. Like, this is someone's comment. This is their theory.
Yeah.
But, like, we haven't even heard about this other truck. We heard Terry's white truck. So it's like, is this actually out there? And, like, because the investigation was so honed in on Terry, maybe there should be more marks here.
I agree. I think that is a botched, that they honed in on Terry so much that they maybe had tunnel vision and were missing some other things, because there's another mention of a man from Terry where initially Terry says, there was nothing weird about that day. I walked up the stairs with him. I watched him go to his classroom. She can't really remember if she watched him go in or if she watched him walk down the hallway. That story seems to change a little bit. Regardless, she says she watched him walk down the hallway. And then the police, in a different interview, are asking her questions. She's like, well, there was a man that Kyron was talking to, but I didn't think anything of it. And for the police, this is how they really start building this narrative that Terry's just changing her story to whatever fits what's happening in the moment. She's just changing her story to make herself not look guilty at that time. So at first it was, well, I saw him go to his classroom. Well, I saw him walk towards the classroom. Well, there was another man there, so maybe look into that. That is sketchy. Like, that is weird how much she changes her story and how many details show up at other times, like when she feels like that's what fits the narrative the best. But if there was a man there, if the children are talking about the man, it's something to look into. I just feel like the police had tunnel vision in this one. As of right now, there is only one suspect in this, but I just don't think she's a very good suspect.
I don't either. And there is something I do just want to note, because I did find it in my internet sleuthing, and it's not something I've seen brought up a lot. And it could be a red herring, you guys. Like, this could be so irrelevant. And like, Morgan, why'd you even mention it? I'm not sure, but like, I learned about it, so I want you guys to know about it. So Kyron's paternal uncle actually started a sentence for sex abuse shortly after he went missing.
I did see that. Yeah.
And his lawyer came out and was like, he was not in the area. He wasn't in the state, like blah, 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 blah. He was in Seattle. But like, as someone that's driven from Seattle to Portland and Portland to Seattle, it's a quick drive. It's easy to do in a day. So I don't know if that's anything, but like, it's something to note in this that like, you have this family member seemingly very close that also did this other thing. So just a note for us all out there.
I know, just something that gets forgotten.
And is
in
it a
this
red
case.
herring? Is it so irrelevant that
Is it just a weirdly timed coincidence that
I know.
it absolutely could be, but yeah, there's just a lot of little things around this case that I felt like the police didn't look into.
There's a lot in this one, and I'm so curious to see your comments, your theories on it, and get the word out here on this one. Like, again, people do come home. People have these memories
Right.
resurface that, oh my God, I do remember this other family, and they do get back to their families. So share this story. We'll have a lot of infographics on
Mhm.
it on our socials at Clues Podcast on Instagram. And let's, get the word out. Maybe this family
Yeah.
can get some closure, whatever that looks like.
There is a little bit of an update that we just wanted to share too before we wrap up the episode. So in 2025, this calendar year, after 15 years without any significant updates, the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office made a pretty big announcement.
Mhm.
Over the previous year, they said that they had spent countless hours digitizing files from Kyron's case. They said, you can still not look at these, but we did put them on our computer.
We're doing something
That
with
was their
them,
update.
guys.
So once all the files are digital, they're actually going to send these to the FBI's famed Behavioral Analysis Unit, and they're going to join them in the investigation for the first time to apply their skills to the new data. And you've definitely heard of BAU. These are the real mind hunters. They're the
Quantico.
they're the
Yeah.
profilers who helped investigate Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy.
It's the real deal.
Hopefully they're coming in with fresh eyes where they don't immediately cling to one suspect. They can look at everything and then decide who they need to look into more.
And from a more unbiased point of view,
Yes.
right? Not someone who's in the thick of this themselves and going through an immense amount of trauma. Like it's truly coming from just fresh eyes, unbiased point of view.
Absolutely. Hopefully. Really, that's like the only update that we have. This is something that's going to start being in the works. And until then, we can really just wait and hope that someday Kyron's going to be found. And if you ask Kyron's parents, they'll tell you that waiting is the hardest part. I did want to include this quote from Desiree because I know that I have brought up multiple times how she might not be the most reliable narrator. I do not think she's an evil person at all. I think she's a
No.
grieving mother who is desperate for answers.
Yeah, clearly going through it.
And I don't blame her for wanting to get the story out there more and help write this book. I just think that she also might be a little tunnel visioned. But she does say, quote, no matter how long a child goes missing, all of us parents are hoping and we hold out. That's why we wear the buttons. That's why we do our candlelight vigils. That's why we talk about him and raise awareness and share the story so that we can keep that hope alive. And I absolutely think that's why she's done everything she's done for this investigation. If you have any information about Kyron Horman, maybe if you were a little kid at the time at the school and you remember something that the police didn't ask you about or you were too scared to come forward, there's like so many reasons to come forward still. But you can contact any of the following hotlines and tip lines. So there's the Multnomah County Sheriff's Office at 503-988-0560. And there's also a tip line that you can email at tips@mcso.us. And with that, we can talk about our missing person of the week. Today, we're going to be highlighting the case of Leeanna Susan Marie Warner. She was born on January 21st, 1998, and she was 5 years old when she went missing. She's described as approximately 3 feet tall, only 48 pounds, and her hair is brown, cut in a bob style with bangs, and her eyes are brown. At the time of her disappearance, she was wearing a sleeveless dark blue denim dress with an attached belt, orange Hanes brand underwear, flower-shaped earrings with a red stone in one ear, and she was described as not wearing shoes or socks. She was last seen on June 14th, 2003. That was a Saturday in Chisholm, Minnesota. She was last seen walking on Southwest 2nd Street between 5 o'clock and 5:15 p.m. after visiting a friend's house, which was approximately 1.5 blocks from her home. I have a little bit of information here on the circumstances of her disappearance. So Leeanna had permission to visit a friend's house and she was expected home by 5 p.m. Her friend was not home, so Leeanna headed back towards her own house but never arrived. She wasn't reported missing until around 8:40 or 9 o'clock p.m. after neighborhood searches failed.
Extensive searches did happen after this. There's been more than 1,700 leads. However, very little evidence to go off of, and police have never had a concrete suspect. She appears to have simply vanished from a 2-block radius around her home.
There are a couple possible witness suspects that I read about. There's one who is a man in his mid-30s, around 5'10", 155 pounds, with a dark colored tattoo. It's maybe a sun or a star on his right arm. There's also a man with a bald/shaved head who drove a 2-door maroon and blue Cadillac, and then a white male with curly hair driving a rusty brown older pickup truck.
This is still a very active investigation. Leeanna's mother passed away in 2022 from lung cancer, and it was her dying wish for her daughter to be found. So her sisters are still actively searching, and they're hoping that a new photo will yield some answers. You'll see on all of our socials, and if you're watching on YouTube, but there is now an age-progressed picture of what they think Leeanna would look like. We want to make sure we get the word out and get this shared and hope to turn up some new leads. Maybe someone remembers something, and hopefully we can bring Leeanna home.
And if anyone does, you can contact the Chisholm Police Department at 218-254-7915 or the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They have a 24-hour hotline at 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-843-5678.
And I just want to say thank you all so much for commenting and bringing light to other missing people, missing children cases. This has been highlighted thanks to a comment from one of you that wanted to see it as a full case presented. So if you do want to see that, maybe we'll get into it. Maybe it's a bonus episode. I don't know. But we wanted,
I agree, yeah.
But we wanted to get this out there. And again, we just really appreciate you all commenting. So if there is someone that's been missing from your area or recently gone missing and we got to get the word out, put it in our comments. We want to see it. This one especially hits close to home for me. I'm an hour away. My home is an hour away from where she went missing. So I was in 3rd grade at this time, you know, same age basically. So
yeah, it's horrible.
It hits close to home.
And I did want to add to, because we are getting a lot of these from listeners, if you were the one who suggested Sabrina Harouni, please send us a message. You can message me on Instagram or the Clues account. We wanted to look into that one a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That is all we have for this episode of Clues. Thank you guys so much for joining us again to unravel all of the clues that are involved in this case. This one is definitely going to haunt me for a while. Really, it's so hard to make sense of this one.
It's so confusing.
Really confusing, and I just feel like we don't have any good leads right now. We do want to hear from you guys now. Please let us know your thoughts, your theories, your feedback. All of that makes this community so special, and you guys put stuff together in ways that I don't, and we don't even talk about on the show, but yeah. I'm always curious what everyone else's theories are.
I know. Our Cluminati's out there sleuthing with us.
I know.
You're bringing a lot of new information, new evidence. I see it in the comments. It's so appreciated. At Crime House, we really do value your support. So again, share your thoughts on social media and remember to rate, review, and follow to help others discover our show. It really helps boost it out there so other people see it and follow and hopefully make this community even bigger and get the word out on all of these cases. And if you're hungry for even more content, we've got you covered there too. For more exclusive content, monthly bonus episodes, early access, and ad-free listening, join our Crime House Plus community on Apple Podcasts.
We will be back next week with another case to unravel. And until then, keep searching, and we will see you next time on Clues. Bye, guys.
Bye.